Nancy, why the title Saints and Scoundrels in the story of Jesus?
Well, I had in my mind for a number of years writing about some different people. There were two people that I had given a little bit of thought to writing a whole book about, that I was just curious about. So, the first chapter on John the Baptist, I've just always been curious about him. Here's this man who actually, when he was even in the womb, recognized who Jesus was, so that he leapt for joy. And when Jesus approaches him there in the Jordan, he recognizes who Jesus is. He somehow, prophetically sees what's at the heart of Jesus's ministry, because he says, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." And of course, this is 3 years before the cross, but he sees where things are headed that clearly. And yet, then this other time we see him at the end of his life, he sends his disciples to Jesus and says, "Are you the one?" And I just always found that interesting, in trying to understand his role in redemptive history. So I wanted to understand more about John the Baptist myself. And then I've just always had the question of Peter. When I've looked at the Peter that we see in the Gospels in comparison to the Peter that we read about in Acts, and then we read his letters in 1st and 2nd Peter. And, the Acts Peter and 1st and 2nd Peter are so dramatically different than the Peter in the Gospels. And so I just had always wanted to explore that. And so, I don't know, I wish I could remember exactly how it came about, but, that was two people. And then somehow I just got this idea. Oh, I guess the other thing was I had written a paper on Stephen for a seminary class I did. So I had those thoughts about him too. And so somehow it came together with this idea of Saints and Scoundrels. And so then I rounded it out to 10. Now, what you don't know is actually I did 10, but when I taught it at my church, because all of these are, honestly, I didn't really plan for this to be a book. I teach a women's Bible study at my church every summer. And I'd kind of run out of things that I had already published. And so I was just planning, what could I teach at my church this summer? And so I was just, I was going to do this series on these various characters and groups of people. And so I kind of did, my plan was to do 5 one summer and 5 the next. And so after I did the 5 the first summer, that's when I thought, well, maybe this would work for a book. Any of you who've done any of my other studies, it's kind of different than some of my other studies. So I wasn't really sure that my publisher Crossway would be interested in publishing it. But I put together those 5 chapters and then said what I thought the other 5 would be that I'd do the next summer, and then put it into a book. And they were interested in publishing it. So that's how they came together. But that first summer, one of my lessons I did, and I didn't feel like it was very good, or that it connected. And the main thing was, I didn't go into this study planning to create a Bible study for unbelievers that would be compelling to see the person and work of Christ and perhaps call them to himself. But once I got into each of these stories, I immediately saw that's what this is. Like, every story that I'm looking at, the main application is you must be joined to Christ. You must see how beautiful he is, and how essential he is, and how sufficient he is, how good he is. And so I began to see that, okay, this is a very evangelistic study. And so I'd written this one chapter that I had as like the second or third. And I realized about it. First of all, it was kind of complicated, and it was too theological for you to be able to invite someone over to your house to do a Bible study that's never read the Bible before. And I just thought, I don't want to put people off when they get just to the second chapter that this is too complicated, or they need to know more biblical history than they do. And so I took that chapter out, and that's when I added the Zacchaeus chapter, because I realized I'd done 10 chapters about scoundrels and hadn't written anything about who the New Testament puts forth all the time as, real scoundrels, which is tax collectors. So then I added that one later.